Hello, this is Elisa Rodriguez, and this is Arianism Today. Today, I'd like to have a little conversation about some important things that I feel like is something we need to start thinking about. Um, we've got this vaccine mandates that are being pushed on everybody, and in the United States, anyways. And we're seeing the craziness going on in Australia and just the draconian nature of the whole world right now. And as Christians, we have to think of what what's happening, what's going on, and I feel like it's not something that we need to ignore as far as where we're at and what could be coming down the pipe. Um, so we have the vaccine mandates and the um, lockdowns, and we've got inflation starting to get more ramped up. We have the China rising, and the reason China is important is because that's the dragon, right? They're symbolically known for the dragon kind of symbolism that comes with them. Also in Revelations, where it's the 200 million man standing army. They're the only ones currently with 200 million man army. Um, so seeing China rise, seeing this fascism, which is the government and the business coming together to enact certain controls. So the government can't tell you that you can't speak, but the companies like Twitter and Facebook and these other things can tell you to stop, or can force you to stop doing things because they're working together. They're not the same entity, so you can't kind of point the finger at either one, but they're both kind of working together for an ends, and that's fascism. And so that's what's really happening right now. You got corporate media that's helping the Democrats, who are essentially, for all intents and purposes, like the Nazis, trying to enforce and impose their will, their opinion, their perspective on everyone else. If you've never read 1984 or know anything about 1984, you might want to look into the movie or read the book, where it talks about how they're trying to get you to say things that aren't true, like 2 plus 2 equals 5, instead of saying 2 plus 2 equals 4. And if you say 5, you're good, because you're proving that mentally you're accepting their perspective on things instead of what the reality is or what the facts are. That's just like saying that there are more than two genders, right? There's more than male and female, or that biological man can be a female, and a biological female can be a male just by saying so or deciding to be, and those kinds of things. If you accept those, if you accept the lie, biologically, there's only male and female. Biologically, by science, we would understand that there's only two genders, but what they're trying to say is you need to accept the 5. 2 plus 2 equals 5. And if you don't say that, then you're not following with the program, and you're not an equal. You're not someone to be considered important, or you're ostracized, or you're taken out of society. And so this, where we're at right now, is pretty crazy, because they have the vaccine. They're trying to not implement a religious exemption. They're trying to shut down. They try to shut down churches during the lockdowns in California, and they try to say that you can't. That there's a lot of things that they try to do against the church. They leave bars open and all this other stuff. open up selling alcohol, but you couldn't go to church, or you can go to church but you can't sing, or those kind of things, causing problems for the church and for Christians. And so everyone, this cancel culture is actually not cancel culture. It's if you look at the Chinese culture war that they had, you either had to be what they wanted you to be and think the same way they did, or they pretty much locked you up or got rid of you or removed you from society. And someone has to be a scapegoat, which the Christians might turn into the scapegoat. Oh, only the Christians don't want to vaccinate. Only the Christians, XYZ. They're starting to do that kind of stuff. And then economically, there's a lot of big banks, big businesses out there that are just purchasing land, farmland, property, just regular houses. And you have the Great Reset, which is the World Economic Forum, the IMF, trying to say that our plan is for the Great Reset to where no one owns anything, but that you'll be happy not owning anything. So you'll be renting your home, you're renting your refrigerator, renting your appliances, renting your clothes, renting your whatever it is. And that's how you'll have stuff, by renting it. Your table, you're renting your phone, you're renting, everything is temporary because you're not actually owning it. You're kind of always paying for it somehow with the payments or taxes. I don't know. But the issue is that when you are in a state of not owning anything and being happy not owning anything, and you're pretty much working for the everything that you have. You can't purchase something and just, hey, this is mine, I can take it, I can throw it away, I can do whatever I want to with it, I can trade it, I can whatever. You can't do that when someone else owns it. So you couldn't, the bartering and the selling and the trading of stuff goes away when you don't own it, and so if you have a car and you want to sell it, you can't sell it because you don't own it. You're renting it. So once you're done with your rental car, you give it back, but you're not able to keep that. And so that's kind of the owning of property is some of the easiest ways of gaining money, gaining the appreciation of property. Like you own a home, you own a car, and it's an older car, you can sell it, you can return back some of that value back to yourself. And that's what's important about owning property, possessing property. But the concept that they're trying to send to us is you don't want to own anything. You want to not own anything, and therefore always have a nice car, or always have a brand new car that you can always rent. So you could rent and trade it out, just like the phones. You have a phone, and if you have on this certain plan, you can trade it out and get another one, and always have the newest and latest and greatest. But you're beholden to the payments of the phone, the contract, or you're always going to be owing on the phone, so you'll always be paying. So you imagine that same concept of how you can always have a brand new phone, but always be paying on a phone at the same time, and never not paying on a phone, with a car, with a house, with all these other things. And you couldn't get that value back by selling the phone because it's not yours. So if you don't own anything, but you're working and paying everything to everyone else, you're essentially a slave at that point. You're a slave. You don't own property. You live at master's house. You have a place that he provided for you. You have to do these things to keep it, or you get punished in one way or another. It's literal slavery, but they're selling it as though you'll have all these great things. You won't own anything, but you'll be happy. And then you add that to forcing vaccines on you and trying to make sure that you accept the vaccine is problematic, and saying that you can't work if you don't take it. It's pretty much saying you can't live, because if you don't take it, your wife doesn't take it, your kids don't take it, you can't work in that society. Let's say in a state like New York or whatever, you can't live in that society. You're not allowed to make a living. You're not allowed to eat at the restaurant. You become a pariah. You become like the Jews were not allowed, and eventually removed from society. And so that's what's happening, is that they're finding a structure in which people who will not comply with what they want to be excluded from from society. It's kind of like getting kicked off or canceled off of Twitter, or getting removed from Facebook or YouTube or any of those other things. You don't have a place to speak, so you could think all that you want, but your perspective and your opinion can't prevail and can't permeate because the voice has been silenced. So the silencing of the voices is done through essentially cancel culture. You're being canceled from society in those societies like New York and all those other places, essentially. Because if you quit your job as a police officer or whatever, and the mandate is nationwide, if you get fired because you don't take the vaccine, where are you going to go work at? McDonald's? Well, McDonald's has the same mandate. It's the same country. So if you go to this other place, it's the same country. You essentially have to work under the table. You become an illegal worker if you do get a job. If you get, digging ditches or doing small-time jobs or whatever, that's essentially what you're relegated to. That's it. Same thing, pretty much. You and the illegal aliens are come together, and you're going to be fighting for the jobs that the illegal aliens had that they're trying to do because they're illegal, and getting paid under the table essentially is what you become a criminal for working, for providing for your family. And so this draconian thought is pretty much saying you're not allowed to live. You don't have the right to live if you don't take the vaccine. You don't have the right to exist and prosper and be in health and to live, because you're not following the dictates of the society. And that's the problem with the society. When you think that it's a democracy, essentially the United States is not a democracy. It is a representative constitutional republic. And so when you think that it's a democracy, you think that the masses decide what happens. But that's not the way it is. We're not a democracy. We're a republic. We have laws that stand as a rule that prohibits the government from overstepping their bounds. The Constitution itself is a law for the government to be restrained. And when you think that it's what the majority or what the society says should be, instead of what the law says, when you're not looking at the law but you're asking, what does everybody else think? That's when you migrate over from a republic into a democracy. And a democracy is temporary, doesn't stay a democracy. It always evolves into a dictatorship, and where one person assumes all control and all the laws go pretty much out the window. Another something to watch is Animal Farm. It's a movie. If it's still available, they might ban it for all I know, but Animal Farm shows how things go bad from bad to worse when you don't follow the laws and you allow people to do whatever they want to. So, suggested viewing is the movie Animal Farm, and then the other one would be 1984. So, because all of these concepts and thoughts have already been pre-thought and dealt with. So, this is what the society is doing. We have this financial system that's starting to collapse because the printing of money, because people weren't allowed to work, which is unconstitutional in itself. People not allowed to work, didn't have money for a long time. People who had property and were renting it out weren't allowed to collect rent. If you think about all of these cascading mandates that they started with the you can't kick people out, you can't collect rent if they can't pay because they didn't work, and this and that. All of those things collectively essentially produce one thing, one outcome. The outcome is renters won't rent because they won't own anything anymore because they couldn't pay their rent, because the other people didn't pay their rent. So not only is the level tier 1 person who was a renter doesn't have a place to stay, and their credit's pretty shot, which will increase homelessness. The person who owned the house, who needed to pay their own mortgage and were waiting on the renter to actually pay the rent. Once they didn't pay their rent, the owner of the rental property has lost his ability to own it, probably going into foreclosure since it took a year, and within 6 months, if you haven't made a payment, you can go into foreclosure. So they can foreclose on you, but they couldn't implement the foreclosure until later. So as that cascade continues to move on, at the bank it doesn't change. The bank doesn't lose its property that it's going to foreclose on because they have the note that everyone was paying toward. They're not going to lose their property, but everyone else will. So that's going to cause a mass homelessness, bad credit, no renters. And who's left to buy these things? Well, these big businesses, the federal government, the BlackRock and Bill Gates and all these people can buy up all of these properties. What for what? Well, for the Great Reset, because there won't be anyone owning property. No, you won't own anything and you'll be happy. And so you see that all of these things are planned to topple these dominoes. They knew what the dominoes would do. This would fall, and then this would fall, then this would fall, and leaving this huge amount of property available. No one with the money to buy it. We can buy it at a cheap rate, they're thinking, and be able to own essentially everything, trying to buy up all of the United States, trying to buy up all property all over the world, because this is a global thing. It's not just the United States. So once you have that going, you have no ownership of property, a lot of people defaulting, and a lot of people not having a way to live. And so then you have the stimulus, right? The first stimulus and the second stimulus and the third, I think, those stimuluses were so much money that it's causing hyperinflation. It's starting to cause inflation. It's just slowly trickling into the economy. But what happened is that once you create money out of nowheres, essentially, and you give it to the people, the velocity of spending goes from 0 to 60,000 because they go straight to the store and buy the food that they haven't had for so long. Or the people who had money and were also able to get a check spent as well. So the velocity of the money is increasing. People are spending faster. And so now you used to have for every little check that they're getting for child tax credit that they're giving every month. That's a slow injection. Not that, I mean, you're not going to say no to money. So I'm not blaming people for spending it, but government giving it, first of all, creates money that wasn't there, and then spends it as it monthly is increasing the amount of money in circulation. And so if you have everybody getting a $700, $800 check that they didn't have before, and so let's imagine one store, and in this store it has 500 people in it, 500 people that shop at this store. And before, everybody would buy one jug of milk each once a week. And then let's say that they started getting checks. Well, let's say a lot of them, half of them, or all of them were not allowed to, or didn't have a lot of money. So that made the stores lower their prices for milk. So then you have one person who is making money in that society of 500 people, and he's able to buy 2 or 3 or 4. They're like, oh wow, we could buy milk for whatever, it's really cheap, so we buy all this milk. And then once everybody gets their checks, everybody wants to go to the store now. Well, when they go to the store, somebody's already bought most of the milk because they had the money for it. So then they start fighting over, everybody's got more money now, everybody's got a surplus. So now they're like, well, next time I'm going to buy 2 or 3 milks instead of the 1 milk that I normally buy because I have extra money and I need it anyways. I could really use it. And so everybody thinks the same way. And so the milk producer or the store is saying, hey, listen, we have empty shelves. People are complaining about us not having milk all the time. So we need to do something about it. Well, we can't cause all the cows in the world to make more milk. They've been making as much milk as they can this whole time. So really the problem is people are starting to hoard it and buying a lot more than they normally do. So how do you regulate that? Well, if so many people want this milk, let's raise the price. Because the more that we raise the price, that'll maybe cool everybody down. That's not honestly, capitalism, in capitalism, that's not the main thing. It's, we can make more money because we can mark it up more, and then less people will buy and more people will be able to get. So if the more and more people are wanting to fight over milk and pay more, or pay or buy quickly as the supply is presented itself, then you have inflation. You have to raise the price because everybody has this imaginary money that didn't exist before. Now everybody's got it. And so because that imaginary money is now available to everybody, the price has to change. The demand and the supply is all out of whack. And once the supply and the demand evens itself out because of the new money that was introduced, the price of milk has to go up because there's more money available. And so if I had a car and I was selling a car and everybody has now got a bonus of $50,000, and everybody's coming to me and saying, oh, what are you selling that car for? I'm selling it for $10,000. Like, oh, pay it for you cash. And this other guy says, no, I'll pay it $1,200. I'll pay $1,500 for it right now. And somebody else comes by and says, no, I'll pay $1,600. Why are they throwing this money around? Because they didn't have it before, and now they have it, and a lot of people have it. And so now money's become less valuable. And so I could sell it, say, no, I'm not going to sell it to any of y'all unless y'all pay $20,000. Well, I'm pretty sure I'm going to get somebody to buy it at $20,000 instead of the $10,000 I was selling it at the beginning, because more people have money and more people are willing to pay for it that way because they have a lot more money. So if you think about it, these stimulus checks that went out, and they went everywhere. They went to, not only did they go to the American people, they went all over to different stupid things, different countries and different parks and different museums and everything else that Congress wanted to put it at. Well, that money is going to eventually trickle down back into regular society. The grocery I mean, the the janitor for those museums are going to get paid eventually. The people that work there are going to get paid eventually. They're going to buy stocks. They're going to buy this. They're going to buy that. And things are going to eventually trickle down to the people to where the price has to go up. So the shelves being empty in the stores and the things that you can't buy and the things that you couldn't buy back then is because it's not because there's a supply shortage as much as it is because there's more people with more money that can buy more now. And the inflation is starting to adjust. So right now, the money side, it's still, the price of things are still low. The availability of money is still high. And so we're at the point where things are super cheap now. The prices that we see today are actually cheaper than they should be, considering how much money is available. So they printed out, what is it, $3 trillion or $5 trillion? And now they're trying to do another stimulus check that's going to inject another $5 trillion or another $3 trillion into the economy. We're not even done with the supply and demand reset that we're having now, but the prices are going up and they're going to continue to go up. Then you inject another. You have the monthly child tax credit checks coming every month, and then you have another 3 trillion, 5 trillion trying to come in again. That's eventually going to trickle everything around to where everything's going to be topsy-turvy for a while. But because there's more money in there, because they're going to inject more money, it's going to make everything seem like we're okay. Because the price is going to go up, but there's more money available. The stock market's going to be going up, and really before a super duper hyperinflation crash, the stock market's going to be going amazing. So the only way that the stock market is going to go from here on out is up. So you'll make money. You'll be able to make lots of money on the stock market from here on out, I would think. I'm not a financial advisor, but I'm just saying. I think that the stock market is going to continue to rise, but eventually it's not going to matter because the money's not going to be worth anything anymore. But for now, it's going to go up for a little while. It's going to make changes. So there's going to be money to be made there, but then money at the end of the day is not going to be worth anything. So unless you buy silver and gold or things of value like that. And so the Christian, you as a Christian, have to think about, where are we at in the timeline? Because they're trying to force these vaccines, and we have the personal worry as Christians about the mark of the beast. So talking about the mark of the beast, if you look up, MIT has come up with, in Massachusetts, has come up with an invisible ink that they could put on your skin like a tattoo so that you can prove that you taken a vaccine. Now think about that. A mark on your hand to prove that you took a vaccine with invisible ink. You wouldn't even see it. You know, you kind of think about when you think about the mark of the beast, and you say, hey, the mark of the beast is going to be like a 666 on the hand. It's going to be so obvious. It's going to be so awkward. You're not even going to be able to not think about the fact that you have the mark of the beast and how it's going to be kind of glaring in your eyes. But we never thought about, what if it's invisible ink and that you couldn't see it? And so all the pictures that we've seen and thought of were of people with marks on their hands that you could see, where you could look at them and say, oh, you're a mark of the beast person. But in reality, if this is the way that this might go, invisible ink that can only be seen through a special device would make it to where the person wouldn't look like they're carrying the mark of the beast. They wouldn't look different. And I've never thought of that, but that's really how we would want it. We would want it to where we wouldn't see it and be bothered by it. Unless, you like tattoos and things like that and want to have that. So it's awkward in that it would be below the skin or a tattoo. There's two different things that they developed. One was below the skin, and the other one was above the skin, but a tattoo. One was invisible ink, and the other one was subcutaneous, underneath the skin. And so you think about, where are we right now? They're trying to force mandates of vaccines. They're trying to force you to not go to church if it's not okay with the government. They're trying to take away your ability to own property. They're saying that you won't own anything and be happy. And you're seeing all of these things happening, and you're like, what happened? And it seems like we're getting to a place to where you have to think about now the people who are losing their jobs and everything else. It's an opportunity right now for people who are quitting their jobs because of not wanting to accept the vaccine. Those are the people we need to reach out with Christ. Those people understand. If they're not Christians already, those people might understand that Christians have been talking about this, and that this is what God has. So we need to think about, those are the people that, if they're not saved, if they're not Christians, might want to accept Christ at this point, because it's getting to the point to where when we do have the mark of the beast in the book of Revelations, it talks about where the beast is going to make war with the saints, and that nobody would be able to buy, sell, or trade without accepting the mark and worshiping the beast and all that other stuff. And so you have to think about, well, if this was what was coming down, what are you going to do if the mark of the beast shows up tomorrow? And I'm not saying that the vaccine is the mark of the beast. I don't know. I haven't taken it, but I don't know. I can't say one way or another. It sounds so eerily close to what the mark of the beast is. You can't buy, sell, or trade. Essentially, if you can't work, you can't make money, you can't buy, sell, or trade. I don't know, though. And the worship of the beast, what is that? The worship of taking the vaccine? Is that the worship? It's like is that like an act of worship to science, or to the Democratic Party, or to socialism, that your religion is science and you're taking the vaccine as an act of worship, like we take the communion or we do baptism or something like that? I don't know. But what I do know is that things are getting crazy. When they say you can't work unless you do XYZ, that sounds like the mark of the beast to me. If they say you can't essentially live without doing what they want you to do, that's sounding pretty bad. And so we have to think about, as Christians, what did they do during the persecution of the first church, the apostles and the apostles, and the first century church? What did they do? They sold their property, and they put all of their money together. They put all their money together, and they got land together, and they lived together. And when I read that before, a long time ago as a Christian, I'm like, who would want to do that? Who wants to live with everybody like that? Why would you sell your property? Why wouldn't you keep it? And it makes sense to me now. Some Christians still had property, right? Like Ananias and Sapphira, they still had property, and then they sold some. It didn't say they sold all of it, but they sold some of their property and gave it to the church. But they lied about, we sold everything. But the point is, to me, Peter said, if you only sold part of it, just say part of it. We only sold part of it. You don't have to lie. So I don't think he would have gotten in trouble for only selling part of it, part of his properties. But what's important is that they were able to, when they felt like it, sell and give to the church, and they had their own little community. Well, there was a lot of persecution in Israel. But there's other Christians in other places, parts of the world, where they obviously still had property, and they still had their own houses and things like that. When we read in the book of Acts what they did. But if you're in a place where there's persecution, like let's say Australia or whatever, and you're not going to take the vaccine, and you're not going to do these other things, you have to come up with an idea. Well, what are we going to do about living for the next XYZ? And you think about the blessings of Revelations are, it tells you, there's 3.5 years here, there's 3.5 years there, 7 years essentially, roughly, to get through the tribulation. And so you want to say, hey, let's see if we can make it 7 years. The goal is 7 years or 8 years. Let's see if we can get 8 years of a way to survive. And how can you survive without? But then, the next question is, how can you survive without stores and supplies and, this and that? If you did get other Christians to sell their property and all come together and live together, how would you do that? Where would you go? And what would you do? And so I just want to give the Christians that are listening to this kind of an idea of what you can do, right? If you were, if all of these people who are quitting their jobs because they're not going to take the I was going to say the mark of the beast, if they weren't going to take the vaccine because of whatever, and essentially there's no way for them to make there's another way of living. There's not one. Let's say there's not one. What do you do? And I'm saying, if the mark of the beast came to this, came to the point to where it's your conscious or your whatever, you start, I would suggest selling property and putting your lot in with other Christians and getting together and starting to figure out how you're going to live off the land with a water well, with farmland, with property, with livestock, with all of these things, and think about how you would live for 7 years that way, because even if it's the mark of the beast isn't coming, and even if the mark of the beast doesn't come for 1,000 years, but these individuals who don't want to take the vaccine and have lost their jobs, have no other place to go. They could obviously move to another state that they could, but we need to start thinking about this now as Christians. It could be a reality. We're seeing examples of what it would really look like and what it would really feel like. And so we can't ignore that. That's reality. So we need to start thinking about, what do we do? Where do we go? What do we start planning out? And how would we move to this other kind of way of living? Because it says that the dragon is going to start pouring out a flood, and all of this, and it kind of goes with I think it's Revelations 12, 6 and 7, where the woman is hiding in her hidden place, and the Satan, the serpent, the dragon, trying to kill her and can't, and then the earth starts swallowing up whatever the devil was trying to send out, and then he turns to her children, which are the Christians, and makes war with them, and and you have to survive by whatever you can, or be beheaded or killed or die of starvation or whatever. Those are realities. That's the Bible, and if you believe, the part where you get saved, you have to believe the part where you could die because you didn't take the mark of the beast and are beheaded, so it's something to really take to heart, and we have to we have to think about that, and if we as Christians start setting aside and planning for when the mark of the beast happens, and take it seriously from now on, and say, look, we got to put aside stuff. We need to own farmland. We need to own property. We need to pay the taxes 100 years in advance. We need to have these things and move forward in a way that's going to be preparing for that, and set your goal as 8 years of sustainable living, and you just shoot for that, and so you need to start thinking like a prepper. Unfortunately, you have to think about things like power, electricity, if you're going to need it or if you're going to want it. Generators, gasoline, those things probably won't last long enough for 7 years or 8 years storage of that kind of stuff. But solar power, that's renewable. Wind energy, those little things. And then it just depends on how well the batteries last and how well all of those things, having backup batteries and stuff to replace what you got, and how much power you need and what you're going to use it for. You're going to need clinical guides for nurses, because you might not be able to go to the hospital. I mean, when they're saying that if you don't take the vaccine, you can't have you can't have some medical procedures done, you can't depend on the hospital at that point. You have to plan for that. Say, hey, if something happens, we can't go to the hospital because we don't have the mark. We don't have the vaccine. We don't have the whatever. So you have to think about, the nurses and the doctors that are being kicked out. They need to keep the information and try to make a Christian hospital, a Christian, thing that can help people survive. And the police as well, could use them for protection or for, just the way to handle things. But nursing, drug handbooks, medications, seeds, survival seeds, heirloom seeds, which are seeds that plants, when you plant them and they go back to seed and you collect the seed, you can reuse it. It'll be the same kind of fruit, be same kind of vegetable. Organic seeds sometimes don't reproduce seed that you can plant again and get a good something out of. So heirlooms are usually what you would want, but organic or not genetically modified, but the not non-heirloom, let's put it that way, seeds might be good for the first few years, and then get into the heirloom seeds. The problem with heirloom seeds is that they get sicker quicker. The plants do. They're not modified to be resistant to a lot of stuff, so they don't produce as well. They're not as good as the seeds that have been manipulated a little bit and kind of fostered and made into a certain kind of breed. So you have to think about, what do you want to go for, and how could you store those seeds for 8 years and have enough for 8 years of and how many people would be eating, and all of that are unknowns. Obviously, God will provide. Then you have to think about probiotics, dehydrating food. How are you going to till the ground? How are you going to keep water on this, on the crops? How are you going to water the crops? Are you going to dig a well? Tires for your vehicles. How are you going to hunt? If you need to. Hunting I wouldn't suggest, but if you had animals around that you could, earplugs, all of these things, tools, specialty tools, maps, kitchen utensils, hand tools, like alcohol, not for drinking, but for like sanitation and cleaning, stoves, how are you going to cook, games, entertainment for the kids, for you, for the family, for everybody, card games, dominoes, chess, Uno, those kind of things. If you need oil filters or oil, if you need ways of warming yourself during the winter time, ropes, socks, wool socks, things that you don't think about, emergency communications, outside communications, dental hygiene, navigation, compass, light at night, depending on whether you have electricity or not. How are you going to cook breads, keep warm? Rodents for storing, when you have storing some of your food, rodents, bugs, keeping them off the plants while they're growing so they don't eat your whole crop. Good boots, quality clothes that are going to last a long time. Wood, feminine products. How are you going to do 8 years worth of feminine products? Pregnancies, midwives, that kind of stuff. Washing clothes, security, surgical stuff, sutures and medical supplies, band-aids, just basic stuff like that. Food, how are you going to store the food? Are you gonna, grain, how are you going to store the grain? Medicines that you need and medicines that other people might need in general, like aspirins and things like that. How are you going to do that? Travel, gas. I mean, the list goes on and on. Generators, batteries, if you're going to use them, matches, tents, rain gear, cold storage, food storage, all these things are something that you as Christians, we should start thinking about. And I'm not saying spend all of your money on that, know that there's a balance. You have to have a balance. If you don't have any of those things, just start getting a little here and there. God will provide, right? So you have to, don't use all your paycheck on that and not have anything for the house today. So generally what I think is a good motto is when you have extra money, half of it goes for today and half of it goes for the future. And that's how you do it. Half of it goes for today. What do we need today? What do we could use it for? And the other half, what could we use it for to store with or to prepare with or things like that? And the church in general has to start thinking this way, because if we believe the mark of the beast, and it's something that I've really thought about since I was a baby Christian. I remember being with a Christian man that took a whole bunch of us Christian guys out to help. We were helping build a hunter's lodge out in the middle of nowheres, and we were building it. And he was putting the entrance to the ceiling up, and he said he wanted to make it a certain width, and I said, wait a minute. I said, I think we should make that bigger. And he's like, why? Why would we make it bigger? And I said, because if we ever get to the point to where Christians are hiding, you need it big enough for people to get in there and hide. And he just kind of like looked at it and was kind of like, whoa, that's crazy. I never thought about the days when, in Revelation, and if you're trying to hide from the mark of the beast and the satanic people that are trying to kill you or behead you, that you might want to have those hidden things. So you think about the Jews and how they were hidden with, like Anne Frank, where they had the walls and the false walls and the all this and that. It took years for them to prepare that, to make it look that way and to have those things there. It's because they saw the slow march, the slow advancement towards, them wanting to kill them and all of that. And so they quietly prepared, quietly set things aside to where they could hide the Jews so they wouldn't be killed. And so the point with that is they foresaw what was happening. They foresaw the need, and they knew that they would have to start preparing and thinking about ways of protecting from the eventual murder of these Jews. And so we have to say that about today. Like, let's say we see that the demonic system is coming a little on strong, and it might not be for another 10, 5, 10, 3, 2 years before they start cracking down on Christianity. It might not be but 6 months from now. We don't know. But if it never happens in our lifetime, we need to start preparing and learning so that we can teach the next generation of Christian how to prepare and how to learn and what lessons we learned from this situation. But I do think because of the financial system and the shortages that they're complaining about, and they're saying that the shelves are going to be bare and everything else, if you could starve out the people, kind of like a siege on a town, eventually they're going to give up or they're all going to die. It's one or the other. And that's essentially, I think, what's happening now, is that they're starting a siege, saying you can't have food, you can't work, and all this other stuff. And now you don't want to take the vaccine either, or the mark, or the whatever, to be what we want you to be, and worship the way we want you to worship, or whatever. Once as that we see that kind of craziness happening around, we have to prepare. And we could use it as a trial run. We could say, hey, listen, maybe this is not going to happen, but we're going to start preparing as though it were, so that we can learn. And then the provisions that you have and the savings that you have and the things that you've set aside, you can use as it gets closer to being expired. And you need to look at, if you're going to store food, you want to make sure that it lasts a long time. But also, if it were 7 or 8 years, stored food in a refrigerator isn't going to last. It's not going to be enough. You're going to have a cow. You're going to have 2 cows. You're going to have a few cows. You're going to have land to feed those cows. You're going to have to clean up after them and keep them healthy and give them what they need, and move on with chickens and things like that. You have to have fat to live. You don't have to have carbohydrates and all this other stuff, but you have to have fat. You have to live. You have to have that. And the meat, and you can live on vegetables, but working out and trying to do this kind of thing, it's going to exhaust you, and you need the best kind of food, the protein and the whatever. So it's just something to think about. Where are we right now? Where are you? What's happening around? Should you prepare? And it's something you should pray and ask God about, and see if that's something you should do. And if you do, I think that at some point, depending on how crazy it gets, the last thing that you'll be able to do is sell your property, where you live, what you have, and move in with other Christians, and just start cascading backwards to land, farming, and property like that before they buy it all, because they're trying to buy all the farmland. Bill Gates, for some reason, feels like that's what he wants to do. And if they own the farms, they're trying to bankrupt the farms. They're forcing the farms in the United States to take their cattle and their pigs and their chickens and stuff and have them processed in China before they come back. Why did Congress do that? I don't know, but it makes it take longer to come back. So even though we have the stuff here, food here, they're making it being processed in another country and come back on boats that aren't coming in. So you think about the spoiled food and everything else that we're sending to China and back. I mean, all of this seems like it's been set up, but how do I know? But what I want you to think about is, where are we in the Bible? You need to ask God that. You need to ask yourself that. You need to see where you think you are. And we need to pray, because this is spiritual warfare. The best thing that we can do is I believe in protecting yourself, and if you want to buy guns and bullets and everything else for protection, I think that's fine. Jesus had the apostles carrying swords and all that, so they had weapons, but not for like civil war or any of that other stuff. because that's what they want. They want a civil war so that they can crack down on people that don't believe like they want. They want a reason to kill people. They want a reason to fight people. So we shouldn't give them that. But what we should do is be able to protect ourselves, from in the normal sense of that, not for a civil war or whatever. But don't go down that road of wanting to do the civil war thing. Get together with other Christians, fall back, maybe plan a property somewhere to get to, learn about digging wells, water wells, and things like that, and try to learn and grow and come together. For if not for anything, but for a place to have Christian get-togethers and maybe if you can get a piece of land with other people and y'all kind of work together on that, you can have communion, you can have parties there, not parties like parties, but parties like celebrations and baptisms and things like that, and just have the property for Christian purposes. And then if you ever need it for collapse of society or the mark of the beast, you have it. And so I think that that's something that we should all think about as Christians, and just see, where are we, and what would we do if the mark of the beast happened today? And what about the people who don't have jobs now and need somewhere to be and need to be able to provide for their families? And if you're not a Christian but you don't want to accept the vaccine and you want to find a place, I would suggest seeing if there's any churches or anything that have property that they might help you, allow you to develop and get prepared for things to get worse. And maybe that might be something that a church that might have a lot of property out somewhere might be willing to do, because we have to prepare as a church. Even if it's not going to happen in our generation, we have to learn and prepare, because we see firsthand what could happen. You can't forget this. Can't ignore it. And so remember, I'm not saying that the vaccine is the mark of the beast. I'm not saying any of that stuff, but we need to look at this as a trial run. If this were the mark of the beast, what would we do? What would we want to do? How would we want to be better prepared next time? Okay, if it's true that shortages are going to be happening by the end of the year or next year, hyperinflation, what would we want to do today? Right? So, I'm not trying to be alarmist or anything. I'm not saying that God gave me a word or anything like that, but it's something to think about. And for people who are buying gold and silver and all these other things, you may want to think about buying gold jewelry, 22 karat gold, 22 or 24 karat gold, because last time we had a problem economically, they made gold illegal to own, gold coins. So if it's got the U.S. Mint on there, it was a coin that was made by the U.S. Mint, they said Americans could not own it. But they didn't say that about jewelry, because obviously you have wedding rings and you have all this other stuff, and people are going to be up in arms about that. Not that they wouldn't be up in arms about not having their money. But so the government bought back the gold, said you can't own it anymore, you have to sell it back. But what you can do is buy 24 karat gold jewelry. 24 karat is pretty much pure, just as pure gold as a gold coin. So if you have 24 karat gold jewelry, then you're able to, by weight, know exactly how much that's worth and sell it and trade for it. And so you may not want to keep everything in coins, because they could just say it's illegal to own, but not jewelry. So you may want to buy jewelry instead. going to try to keep this just an hour, but we need to think, we need to pray and ask God, where are we? And obviously, if you couldn't prepare and if you weren't able to prepare and you had to go with just what you had, God is able to provide. Manna from heaven, ravens from the sky, like they fed Elijah, the oil that just wouldn't stop pouring for the widow, the nation of Israel being fed and provided water. God can provide for you. So don't get despair and say, God, I'm not prepared. I'm not going to. God can prepare for you, or God can provide for you. But you can make a proactive approach in that area as well. Because if you think about the woman, I'm going to go there. Just to read it. Revelations 12:1 says, and a sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars on her head. She was pregnant. She was pregnant with, verse 2 says, she was pregnant and cried out in pain as she was about to give birth. This is Israel. This is Eve. This is Israel about to give birth to the Messiah, pregnant with the Messiah, pregnant with, and I say Eve because Eve had the promise of the Messiah to crush the snake's head, and she probably assumed that she would have seen that in her lifetime and didn't. But it was a promise that she got, that God will provide a seed that would crush his head. And so part of this is Eve. Part of this is Israel that's been pregnant with the Messiah, waiting and waiting and waiting for the Messiah to show up. Verse 3 of Revelations 12 says, then another sign appeared in heaven, an enormous red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns on its head. The devil, right? That's the devil. That's the dragon, the red dragon. Verse 4 says, its tail swept 1/3 of the stars out of the sky and flung them to the earth. The dragon stood in front of the woman who was about to give birth so that he might devour her child the moment he was born. So 1/3 talks about how Satan, when the stars symbolically are angels, he took a 1/3 of the stars of the sky with him and flung them to the earth. 1/3 of the angels is what is believed to be interpreted here, that 1/3 of the angels followed after the devil. The dragon stood in front of the woman and was about to give birth so that he might devour her at the moment he was born, or devour her child the moment he was born. That's Jesus, right? He had the, just like Moses, since Moses is symbolic of Jesus, tried to kill all the little boys. And Moses was born. Now he was symbolic of the Messiah, and then the Messiah, the actual Messiah, Jesus, was coming, and they had the children, the little boys, killed, trying to make sure that the Messiah was never born, or the King of Israel was not born. So this is the figurative way that the dragon was in front of her, waiting to devour her child as soon as he was born. That's how the devil was trying to kill the Messiah and end the Messiah and prevent the Messiah at the very beginning. She gave birth to a son, a male child. This is verse 5. She gave birth to a son, a male child, who will rule the nations with an iron scepter. That's prophetic for the Messiah. And her child was snatched up to God. He died, rose again, came back to God, and we know that story in Acts, and to his throne, right? To God and to his throne. It says in the scriptures that God let Jesus sit on his throne. So verse 6 says, the woman fled into the wilderness to a place prepared for her by God. See, that's the part where I want you to think about. The woman fled to the wilderness, to a place prepared for her by God. God prepared this place for her, where she might be taken care of for 1,260 days. That's where she ran to be taken care of for 1,260 days. 1,260 days is roughly half of 7 years. So you think about the tribulation, and half of the 7 years, she has a place provided for her. Verse 7 says, Then war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back. So that shows that it was his angels were a third of the stars that fell in verse 4. But you can see that the dragon has his own angels. Verse 8, But he was not strong enough, and they lost their place. The great dragon was hurled down, and the ancient serpent called the devil, or Satan, who leads the whole world astray, he was hurled down to the earth, and his angels with him. Because obviously God said, let me make I had another video about Michael the archangel, but we talk about how God said, let me put your enemies as your footstool, right? And the earth is the footstool. So all of the enemies of Jesus are on the earth now, confined to the earth. The earth is Jesus' footstool, God's footstool as well. And that's where all of the enemies were. And it says in verse 10, Then I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, Now the kingdom of salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Messiah, for the accuser of our brothers and sisters who accuses them before our God day and night has been hurled down. The devil's been hurled down, and his accusers, right, the accuser of the brethren, he's not there anymore. They triumphed over him by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. So now this battle, they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. They did not love their lives so much as to shrink from death, because they're being killed, martyrdom, persecution. Verse 12, Therefore rejoice, you heavens, and you that dwell in them, but woe to the earth and the sea, because the devil has gone down to you. He is filled with fury because he knows his time is short. So you think about the heavens are rejoicing because of all of the Christians that have gone to heaven, and because we're getting to the last stages of stuff, and but woe to the earth and the sea, because the devil is on the earth and confined to the earth. And so he knows his time is short. So that's why the devil everything seems rushed right now. Everything's going on Mach speed. Everything's just kind of going really fast, and things are falling apart, and church is not allowed to do this and that, and people aren't allowed to get outside, and they're getting arrested for breathing without a mask and things like that. It's just crazy. It's really fast. Verse 13 says, When the dragon saw that he had been hurled to the earth, he pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child. That's Israel. Verse 14, The woman was given 2 wings of a great eagle, so that she might fly to the place prepared for her in the wilderness, where she would be taken care of for a time, times half a time, out of the serpent's reach. So Israel is allowed to be protected again. I don't know if this is an again or at a different time period, but she's got a certain time that she is going to be hiding or being hidden from the reach of the dragon or the serpent. Verse 15, Then from the mouth of the serpent spewed water like a river to overtake the woman and sweep her away with the torrent. This is like the water's rivet, like a river of water coming out, trying to drown her, trying to drown anybody. And then verse 17 says, Then the dragon was enraged at the woman and went off to war against the rest of her offspring, those who keep... Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped a verse here. To overtake, verse 15 says, Then from his mouth the serpent spewed like a river to overtake the woman and sweep her away with the torrent. He tried to get rid of Israel, but it didn't work. Verse 16 says, But the earth helped the woman by opening its mouth and swallowing the river that the dragon had spewed out of his mouth. So this, whatever is being spewed out, is being absorbed by the earth. The earth is taking it in and protecting Israel. Verse 17, you'll see why I'm not saying that it's the church. Just verse 17 will explain why I'm not saying that it's the church, that it's Israel. Because in verse 17 it says, Then the dragon was enraged at the woman and went off to wage war against the rest of her offspring. So the rest of her offspring. So Israel is her offspring, but the rest of her offspring is the Christian, the non-Israel Christian Gentile people. That's what I believe it is. The church. Not Israel proper, but the church. To wage war against the rest of her offspring, those who keep the commands and hold fast that their testimony about Jesus. So the point that I'm trying to make is that God provided a place for Israel, right, to hide, and God will do the same thing for us. Provide a place for us, just like in Israel, the plagues and everything was going on with Moses, and he protected the people of God in the midst of that. And that's what he's going to do with us. In the midst of all the calamities and all the craziness going on, we're going to be seeing miracles. We're going to be seeing angels for real. We're going to be seeing this. And God's going to protect us. And so if we were, and I'm not saying we are prophetically in this time period here, but if we were prophetically in this time, and if we were going through the tribulation right now, and we got to the point to where we were trying to make it through, if we were able to live for 7 to 8 years through this tribulation, if it was, let's say tribulation started a year ago, if this was the tribulation and we made it through the 8 years, we would literally see the blessing of this surviving is that we would literally see Jesus come back to heaven. Come back from heaven to earth, and see Jesus get rid of the beast and the false prophet, and the Antichrist, and sit on the throne of Jerusalem. For we would see him come back to earth and rule as a king on earth. That would be amazing. That would be such a blessing. Now, if we died in the midst of this tribulation and were beheaded or died of starvation because we didn't take the mark and worship the beast and all this other stuff, then we would be able to rule and reign with Jesus for 1,000 years on earth. But if we, I'm not sure, but if we survive through without dying, we would be able to see Jesus return, meet Jesus in the air with the dead in Christ and all that. But I don't think that we would live for 1,000 years. I'm not sure, though. I'm not sure. It says, I think if you died during the tribulation, you got to live, or were beheaded in one way or another before Jesus returns. So I'm not sure exactly, but it's something along those lines. So, but being able to see Jesus return to earth and be a king on the throne in Israel would be awesome. Would be worth the 8 years or 7 years of tribulation. And so if we were in that time, if we were in that, to be able to see the love of our lives, the Savior come back to earth and rule on earth through the tribulation, is the only thing that you could look forward to during this tribulation, to say, hey, it's going to be worth it in 8 years or in 7 years or in whatever years. We're going to see Jesus. He's so close. And so it's not a bad thing. Revelations is a blessing. It's not a bad thing. It's God trying to get people to accept his son. It's not meant to be bad and horrible for everyone, but it's trying to get them to wake up to what they need to do, which is accept his son, because the end is coming for this crazy world, and Jesus is going to take over for 1,000 years. So the end of the world is not yet. Even when Jesus comes back, it's going to be another 1,000 years on earth, And then the devil will be out for a day, and he'll get some people to turn on Jesus. It's going to be crazy. I can't believe that the devil would be able to do that, but he'll be able to get people to turn on Jesus after 1,000 years. And then it's the judgment seats and all this other stuff. So, but it'd be totally worth it that if we were going through this and we were able to see Jesus return to the earth on the white horse, with the sword coming out of his mouth and getting rid of the Antichrist, being able to see that would be awesome. To be able to see the two prophets of God, and that they die, and the whole world sees them dead, and then they resurrect after 3 days in front of the whole world, on TV and on the internet and whatever. It would be amazing to see these awesome, powerful miracles. Would be awesome. I guess the negative is that you be in the tribulation, but the good thing would be to see all these things happen. So don't be afraid. God is faithful, and he will take care of you. And that's it. Don't know what else to say. If you have any questions or whatever, just let me know. But that's what I'm thinking about right now, honestly. It's just where are we? And what should we be preparing for if we are in the end times? What are we going to do? And if we're not, what should we do still? So that's kind of what I'm just asking everyone to think about. Have a good one.